Alexandria Bay, New York, January 1904. Winter grips the Thousand Islands. Hart Island, a speck of land in the frozen St. Lawrence River, holds a castle. 6 stories of stone, Rhineland turrets piercing gray sky. Windows, 120 rooms worth, stare empty. The drawbridge is locked, the powerhouse silent. Snow drifts against unfinished walls. 3 years ago, 300 men worked here. Stone echoing with hammers, saws, voices, building a dream, a monument to love. George C. Boldt, one of America's richest men, was building a castle for his wife, Louise. Every detail perfect, every room designed for her. Italian gardens, tunnels connecting buildings so she'd never face winter cold. A children's playhouse shaped like a tower, a dovecote because Louise loved birds. But Louise will never see it finished. On January 7th, 1904, she died, suddenly, heart failure, age 41. George sent one telegram to Hart Island: stop all construction. The workers left. The tools stayed where they fell. The castle, 120 rooms, 90% complete, every stone placed with love, froze. George never returned, not once, for 47 years, until his own death in 1916. The castle sat, unfinished, abandoned, a monument to love that became a monument to grief. But here's the question that haunts Hart Island. Did George abandon the castle because Louise died? Or did Louise die because George was too busy building her a castle to notice she was dying? If you love deep investigations into America's most romantic tragedies, where grand gestures meet impossible loss, subscribe now. Let's begin. Hart Island, Thousand Islands region, St. Lawrence River, between New York and Ontario. The island is small, 5.5 acres, natural, rocky, pine trees, surrounded by water that freezes solid in winter, sparkles impossibly blue in summer. In the center, Boldt Castle. The numbers tell the scale. 6 stories above ground, 120 rooms total, approximately 18,000 square feet of interior space, 11 buildings on the property: castle, powerhouse, Ulster Tower, dovecote, hennery, gazebo. Rhineland castle architectural style, German Gothic revival. Construction period 1900 to 1904, stopped abruptly. 300 workers at peak construction. 73 years abandoned, 1904 to 1977. Restoration ongoing since 1977. Annual visitors 100,000 plus. But numbers don't capture the heartbreak. Stand at the dock, look up. The castle rises from stone foundation, gray granite, towers at corners, round, crenellated, medieval. The main keep, 6 stories, central, wings extending, a porte-cochere, covered entrance designed for carriages. The architecture is deliberately romantic, not historically accurate. George wasn't building a real medieval castle. He was building a fantasy, a Rhineland castle transplanted to New York because Louise loved the Rhine. They'd honeymooned there. The details that survive tell the story. The heart. The island wasn't originally shaped like a heart. George had it reshaped, dynamited rock, moved earth, engineered the shoreline into a heart. For Louise, literally carved his love into the landscape. The tunnels, underground passages connecting buildings. Why? So Louise could move between castle, powerhouse, and service buildings without going outside in winter. Thoughtful, obsessive, or both. The Ulster Tower, a children's playhouse, 4 stories, fully furnished, miniature castle for the Boldt children, Clover and George Jr. Louise wanted them to have magical childhood. George built magic. The Italian gardens, not yet completed in 1904, but planned, terraces, statuary, reflecting pools, European elegance. Louise loved gardens. The dovecote, because Louise loved birds, particularly doves. George built them a palace. Every detail was for her, about her, to make her happy. And she died before moving in. The castle George built never finished. Work stopped mid-project. The grand staircase incomplete. Some rooms only studs and plaster. The roof, portions missing. Windows, some glazed, others empty. And George never came back. He lived 12 more years after Louise's death, died 1916 at age 64, ran the Waldorf Astoria, managed his hotels, made millions, but never set foot on Hart Island again. The castle sat for 73 years. Through World War I, the Roaring Twenties, the Depression, World War II, the 50s, 60s, 70s, decades of weather, of neglect, of vandalism. By the 1970s, Boldt Castle was a ruin. Roof collapsed in sections, windows shattered, walls crumbling, graffiti everywhere, copper stripped, woodwork rotted. The Italian gardens overgrown wilderness, the powerhouse gutted, the dovecote collapsed. Local teenagers used it as a party spot. Ghost hunters claimed hauntings. Vandals destroyed whatever remained valuable. And through it all, the question, why? Why abandon something so beautiful, so expensive, so loved? The easy answer, grief. George was heartbroken. The castle without Louise was unbearable. But there's another answer, one whispered by historians, by people who knew the Boldts, by anyone who looks closely at the timeline. George was so busy building the castle that he missed Louise dying. She'd been sick, not suddenly. Heart problems, fatigue, for months, maybe years, while George was in New York managing the Waldorf, or on Hart Island supervising construction, obsessed with perfection. And when she died, suddenly to him, but not suddenly to her body, he realized he'd built the wrong thing. Not a castle, but presence, time, attention. Things you can't construct, can't delegate to 300 workers, can't finish in time. That's the real tragedy of Boldt Castle. Not that it's unfinished, but that it was always insufficient. Louise didn't need 1,200 rooms. She needed her husband. And George gave her stone. To understand Boldt Castle, understand George. George Charles Boldt. Born April 25, 1851, Prussia, now Germany. Family, middle class. Not poor, not rich, modest. At age 13, 1864, George emigrated to America, alone, a teenager seeking opportunity. Arrived in New York, spoke minimal English, had no connections, just ambition. He found work, hotels, started as bellboy, lowest rung, carried bags, opened doors, smiled, learned. George was smart, observant. He watched how hotels operated, how guests were treated, what worked, what failed. By his early 20s, he was assistant manager. By his 30s, manager. By his 40s, owner. His reputation, attention to detail, obsessive, nothing overlooked. Guest comfort was everything. Service was art. In 1893, George achieved his masterpiece, the Waldorf Hotel. Then in 1897, he merged it with the adjacent Astoria Hotel, creating the Waldorf Astoria, New York's most prestigious address. The Waldorf Astoria under Boldt became legend. 1,000+ rooms, the largest hotel in the world at the time. European service, luxury imported from grand hotels of Paris, Vienna, Berlin. Celebrity clientele, presidents, industrialists, royalty stayed there. Innovations, room service, a la carte dining, lavish ballrooms, unprecedented staff-to-guest ratio. George ran it perfectly, personally. He walked the floors, inspected kitchens, greeted important guests, micromanaged every detail. He became wealthy, very wealthy, not Rockefeller level, but substantial. Estimates suggest $10 to $20 million at death, roughly $300 to $600 million today. But wealth came at cost. George worked constantly, 80-hour weeks routine. The Waldorf demanded everything. His family, Louise, Clover, and George Jr., lived in New York, but George was always working. Even home, he was mentally at the hotel, planning, strategizing, perfecting. Louise managed. She was social, hosted, raised the children, but she was also lonely. Her husband was there, but absent, present, but preoccupied. By the late 1900s, Louise's health began declining. Heart problems, weakness, fatigue. Doctors diagnosed stress, overwork. By proxy, her husband's stress became hers. They prescribed rest, fresh air, time away from the city. George listened, partially. He bought property, Wellesley Island, one of the Thousand Islands, near Alexandria Bay. He built Wellesley House, a summer residence, and Wellesley Island Farms, working farm, pastoral, peaceful. Summers, the family relocated there. Louise rested, the children played. George worked. He commuted to New York, spent weekdays at the Waldorf, weekends in the islands. But it wasn't enough. Louise needed more. So George decided, build something grand, a castle, a monument, a place so beautiful, so comfortable, so perfect that Louise would be happy. He chose Hart Island, near Wellesley Island, but separate, smaller, more intimate. He'd build a castle there, European, romantic, every detail for her. Construction began 1900. George hired the best, architects, multiple firms, including Hewitt & Hewitt, New York Society architects. 300 workers, stonemasons, many Italian, German, imported skills. Carpenters, artists, landscapers. Materials imported from Europe, stone, fixtures, furnishings. Timeline, estimated 3 to 4 years to completion. The budget, estimates vary, but likely $2.5 million plus, roughly $80 to $100 million today. Not just the castle, everything, gardens, powerhouse, tunnels, outbuildings. George supervised obsessively, drew plans, made changes, visited frequently. Nothing was good enough. Everything could be perfected. Meanwhile, Louise's health continued declining. Friends later recalled she seemed tired, weak, but stoic. She didn't complain. She supported George's vision, loved the idea of the castle. But did she need it? Or did she need George to stop building and just be with her? We'll never know. Louise left no diary, no letters survive expressing her feelings about the castle. What we know is in early January 1904, Louise was in New York. George was likely there too. Winter, the Waldorf was busy. On January 7, 1904, Louise collapsed. Heart failure. Sudden or suddenly catastrophic after years of decline. Doctors were called. Nothing could be done. She died within hours, age 41. George was devastated, reportedly inconsolable. The woman he'd loved since their marriage in 1877, 27 years together, was gone. And the castle, nearly finished, 90% complete, ready for occupancy by summer, became unbearable. He sent the telegram, "Stop all construction," and never returned. For 12 years until his own death, George ran the Waldorf, managed his empire, raised his children with help. Clover and George Jr. were teenagers by then, but he never went back to Hart Island. Friends said he couldn't. The castle was monument to his failure. He'd built stone instead of spending time, created palace instead of presence, and Louise died anyway. That's George's tragedy. Not that he lost her, but that he lost her while building something for her. The castle became accusation. You built me instead of loving me. Not literally, Louise never said that, but George heard it anyway, in the wind through the unfinished halls, in the empty rooms, in the silence. So he left it, unfinished, abandoned, a monument to love that became monument to guilt. And Hart Island waited for 73 years, waited for George to return. He never did. Waited for someone to finish it. No one came. Waited for purpose, and slowly, painfully, became ruin. The Thousand Islands, St. Lawrence River, between New York and Ontario. 1,864 islands officially, though the count varies depending on definition. An island qualifies if it's above water year-round, supports at least 2 living trees, larger than 1 square foot. Some islands are massive, acres of forest, private estates. Others are tiny, a rock, a tree, barely visible. Hart Island was middle-sized, 5.5 acres, natural, rocky, pine trees, beautiful, but not heart-shaped originally. George bought it in 1895, 5 years before construction began. Cost? Unknown, but likely modest. The Thousand Islands weren't yet prime real estate. Wealthy New Yorkers preferred Newport, the Adirondacks. But George saw potential. The region was being developed. The Thousand Islands Bridge, connecting U.S. and Canada, was proposed. Tourism was growing. More importantly, Louise loved it. The water, the air, the peace, away from New York's chaos. George decided this would be her paradise. First step, reshape the island. It was irregular, lumpy, awkward. George wanted it perfect. He hired engineers, dynamited rock, moved earth, sculpted the shoreline into a heart. Literally, from above, from a boat, from the Canadian side, Hart Island is unmistakably heart-shaped. 2 lobes at the top, point at the bottom. Symmetrical, deliberate. This wasn't accident. This was engineering love, carving affection into landscape. The work took months. Crews blasted, moved tons of stone, graded, planted, created artificial perfection from natural chaos. Cost? Tens of thousands of dollars, for aesthetic, for symbol. Worth it? George thought so. He wanted every detail to announce, this island is about love. Next, plan the buildings. Not just a castle, an estate, a complex. Everything Louise might need. 1. Boldt Castle, main residence. 6 stories, 120 rooms, Rhineland German Gothic Revival style, towers, turrets, stone walls, grand entrance hall, ballroom, dining rooms, library, bedrooms, servants' quarters, modern systems, electricity, central heating, indoor plumbing, cutting edge for 1900. 2. Powerhouse, separate building on the island, generated electricity for the entire estate, also housed heating systems, water pumps, architecturally designed to match the castle, not ugly utility building, but miniature castle itself. 3. Ulster Tower, children's playhouse, 4-story miniature castle, separate small island connected by footbridge, fully furnished with child-sized furniture. For Clover and George Jr., Louise wanted them to have magic. 4. Dovecote, because Louise loved birds, especially doves. Elaborate structure, more decoration than function. Symbol: doves equal love, peace, fidelity. 5. Hennery, as in chicken house. Even the chickens got castle-style architecture. Fresh eggs for the family, self-sufficient luxury. 6. Italian gardens, planned terraces descending to the water, statuary, fountains, reflecting pools, inspired by European villa gardens Louise admired. 7. Tunnels, underground passages connecting buildings, heated, lit, so Louise could move around the estate in winter without going outside, no cold, no wind. The vision was total, not just a house, a world, an island paradise where Louise would be happy, comfortable, safe, where every detail anticipated her needs. Construction began spring 1900. Workers arrived by boat, materials shipped from New York, from Europe, stone came by barge, timber, fixtures, everything. The work was massive, foundation blasting into bedrock, walls rising stone by stone, Italian stonemasons carved details, German craftsmen installed woodwork, artists painted, tiled, decorated. Peak workforce, 300 men, living on nearby islands or in Alexandria Bay, commuting by boat daily, working 10 to 12-hour days, 6 days a week. The pace was intense. George wanted perfection and speed. Finish by 1903, move the family in summer 1904. The Boldts visited regularly, summers at Wellesley House while workers built on Hart Island. Louise could see progress, the towers rising, the walls climbing, her castle taking shape. Did she love it? Accounts suggest yes. She was excited, planned furniture, chose fabrics, dreamed of hosting. But did she sense the cost? Not financial, George was rich enough, but personal. George was obsessed. Every visit to Hart Island meant hours supervising, inspecting, changing plans, demanding perfection. Louise saw him less. Even when physically present, he was mentally on the island, building. Friends later recalled, Louise seemed resigned. She supported George's vision, but she also seemed untired, not just physically, emotionally. The castle was supposed to be a gift, but it felt like, what, burden? Distraction? Monument to George's need to control? We don't know. Louise kept her feelings private. What we do know, by 1903, the castle was nearly done, maybe 90% complete. Exterior finished, interior, most rooms completed, some details remaining. The Italian gardens partially planted, the tunnels functional. George planned a grand opening, summer 1904. Move the family in, host parties, show the world what love could build. Then January came, and Hart Island, shaped like a heart, built for love, nearly perfect, froze. Incomplete, abandoned, empty. The island that was supposed to be paradise became prison, prison for ghosts, prison for guilt. And George never came back to face it. Let's walk through what George built, room by room, detail by detail. Because understanding the castle means understanding the obsession. Exterior: German Rhineland Gothic Revival style. Gray granite stone walls, thick, load-bearing, imposing. 6 stories, basement, ground floor, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th floors, plus tower rooms. Round towers at corners, medieval aesthetic, no defensive function. Crenellated parapets, decorative castle battlements. Porte-cochere, covered carriage entrance, elaborate stone archway. Drawbridge, not functional, no moat, decorative symbolism. Ground floor, grand entrance hall, 30+ feet high, oak paneling, grand staircase ascending. Ballroom, capacity 100+ guests, parquet floors, crystal chandeliers. Library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, fireplace, reading nooks. Dining room, seats 20, imported European furniture. Morning room, Louise's sitting room, south-facing windows, light-filled. Conservatory, indoor garden room, glass walls, exotic plants. Second floor, master suite, George and Louise's private apartments, multiple rooms. Guest bedrooms, 6 to 8 rooms, each with private sitting area. Sitting rooms, informal spaces for family. Bathrooms, modern plumbing, porcelain fixtures, heated towel racks. Upper floors, additional bedrooms, guest rooms, children's rooms, servants' quarters. Servant spaces, separate staircases, service areas hidden from family view. Storage, massive attics, closets, linen rooms. Tower rooms, observatory, top of one tower, 360-degree views of the islands. Private study, George's retreat, isolated, quiet. Music room, Louise played piano. This room was her musical sanctuary. Basement, kitchen, industrial scale, multiple ovens, cold storage. Laundry, washing facilities, drying rooms. Wine cellar, temperature controlled, capacity 1,000 plus bottles. Mechanical rooms, heating, electrical systems. Tunnel entrances, passages to powerhouse and other buildings. The systems, cutting edge for 1900. Electricity throughout, rare for the time. Most homes still used gas. Central heating, boilers in the powerhouse, radiators in every room. Indoor plumbing, flush toilets, hot running water, bathtubs. Intercom system, speaking tubes connecting rooms. Dumbwaiters, food service from kitchen to upper floors. Elevators, possibly planned, unclear if installed before construction stopped. The details, where obsession shows. Custom woodwork, oak, mahogany, hand-carved details. Stained glass windows, custom designs, European craftsmen. Fireplaces, 20 plus throughout, each unique design, imported marble mantels. Hardware, custom bronze fixtures, door handles, hinges, every piece designed. Tiles, imported ceramic, hand-painted in bathrooms and kitchen. Wallpaper, European patterns, expensive, installed by specialists. Cost breakdown, estimates. Land acquisition and shaping, $50,000 to $100,000. Castle construction, $1.5 to $2 million. Furnishings and fixtures, $500,000 plus. Outbuildings, powerhouse, Ulster Tower, etc., $500,000 plus. Landscaping and gardens, $200,000 plus. Total, $2.5 to $3 million plus, $80 to $100 million today. Timeline, 1900, construction begins, foundation and first floor walls. 1902, walls rise, roof framing begins. 1903, interior finishing, landscaping begins. January 1904, construction stops, 90% complete. What was left unfinished? Grand staircase, installed, but details incomplete. Some upper floor rooms, walls up, no finishes. Italian gardens, partially planted, statuary not all placed. Tunnels, functional, but not fully decorated. Dovecote, partially built. And Louise never spent a single night there. Never walked the grand staircase, never sat in the morning room, never looked out from the observatory, never hosted in the ballroom. The castle built for her, every room designed for her comfort, every detail chosen to please her, and she died before she could see it. That's the cruelty of Boldt Castle, not that it's unfinished, but that it was useless. All that stone, all that money, all that time, all that obsession, and the woman it was built for never experienced any of it. Did George realize? In the days after Louise's death, did he understand? He'd built the wrong thing. Not rooms, but moments. Not castle, but presence. Louise didn't need 120 rooms. She needed her husband, not across the river building, but beside her, present. And when she died, George faced the truth. The castle was monument to his failure. He'd tried to build love, but love isn't built. It's given, freely, in time, in attention, in presence. Things George didn't give enough of. So he stopped construction and never came back, because the castle, beautiful, expensive, nearly perfect, was also accusation. You built me instead of loving me. And George couldn't face that. So he left it, unfinished, abandoned. A monument to love that became monument to what love isn't. Stone, however beautiful, will never replace presence. And 120 rooms, however elegant, will never fill the absence of the person you built them for. That's Boldt Castle's lesson. Painful, permanent. We've talked about George, the builder, the obsessive, the grieving husband. But what about Louise? Because Boldt Castle is supposedly about her, for her, monument to her. Yet she's almost invisible, a name, a death date, the reason construction stopped. Who was Louise Augusta Kehrer Boldt? Born 1862, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Family, German immigrants, middle class, respectable but not wealthy. Louise grew up during the Civil War era, educated, unusual for women of her class. She spoke German and English, played piano, read literature, was cultured, refined. In 1877, at age 15, Louise met George Boldt. He was 26, 11 years older, already working in hotels, ambitious, rising. They married that same year. Louise was 15, George was 26. By modern standards, disturbing, a teenager marrying a man in his late 20s. By 1877 standards, not unusual. Women married young, often to older men with prospects. Did Louise have choice? We don't know. Marriages were often arranged, or at least heavily influenced by parents. Love developed after marriage, not before. What we do know, Louise and George stayed married for 27 years, had 2 children, Clover, daughter, born 1882, and George Jr., son, born 1885. By all accounts, they were content? Happy? The word used most was devoted. George was devoted to Louise. Louise supported George. They functioned as a team. But what did Louise want? That's harder. She left almost nothing. No diary. Few letters survive. No memoir. We know fragments. She loved music, played piano skillfully, hosted musical evenings. The music room at Boldt Castle was designed specifically for her. She loved nature, preferred the Thousand Islands to New York City, loved birds, hence the dovecote, loved gardens. She was social, hosted at the Waldorf at Wellesley House, enjoyed company, conversation, entertaining. She was private. Despite social role, she avoided publicity, few photographs, few interviews. She let George be public face. She was unwell. By the late 1900s, health declining, heart problems, fatigue, weakness. Doctors diagnosed heart disease, progressive, no cure. Treatment, rest, fresh air, avoid stress. George responded, bought Wellesley Island, summers away from the city, built Boldt Castle so she'd have paradise. But did this help or make it worse? Because building Boldt Castle was stressful. George was obsessed. Every summer, instead of relaxing with Louise, he was supervising construction, inspecting, changing plans. Louise supported. She wanted the castle too, reportedly, but it also meant George was distracted, absent, even when physically present, and her health continued declining. Friends later recalled Louise seemed resigned. She knew she was dying. Heart disease, progressive, meant death was coming. Question was, when? She never spoke of it publicly, kept up appearances, hosted, smiled, played piano. But privately, she must have known. Did she want George to stop building, to spend time with her instead? Or did she appreciate the castle, the gesture, the proof that he loved her? We don't know, and that's the tragedy. Louise is voiceless. We only have George's version, his actions, his grief. But what did Louise feel, want, need? The castle answers. She needed George, not stone. But we'll never hear her say it. On January 7, 1904, Louise was in New York, at their residence or possibly at the Waldorf, records unclear. She collapsed, heart failure, sudden, or the final crisis after years of decline. Doctors came, nothing could be done. She died within hours. Age 41, 27 years of marriage, 2 children, teenagers, a castle nearly finished. George was devastated. Accounts describe him as inconsolable, broken, like a man who'd lost everything. The funeral was held in New York, private. Louise was buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, where eventually George would join her. And the castle? George sent one telegram: stop all construction. The workers left. The island froze. The monument to Louise became monument to loss. But here's the uncomfortable question. Did George grieve Louise, or did he grieve his failure? Because grief has layers. You grieve the person lost, but you also grieve yourself, the version of you that existed with them, the future you planned, the errors you can't undo. George grieved Louise, absolutely, sincerely. But he also grieved, I built the wrong thing. I spent 3 years building stone, and she died anyway. I could have spent those years with her, and I chose construction instead. That's the grief that breaks, not just loss, but regret. And regret has no remedy. You can't rebuild the past, can't apologize to the dead, can't undo choices. So George did the only thing he could, never returned. Because returning meant facing the question, what if? What if he'd spent those years with Louise instead of building? What if he'd been present instead of obsessed? What if love was measured in time, not stone? Those questions have no good answers, only pain. So George avoided them, lived 12 more years, ran the Waldorf, raised his children, succeeded professionally, but never went back to Hard Island, because the castle, beautiful and useless, was eternal question. Did you love her, or did you love building for her? And George couldn't answer. So he left it, unfinished, abandoned, silent. And Louise, voiceless in life, voiceless in death, became symbol of love, of loss, of devotion. But we'll never know, what did Louise want? Only what George thought she wanted. And sometimes that's not the same thing. January 7th, 1904, Thursday, New York City. Louise Augusta Boldt collapses. Location, uncertain. Either the Boldt residence or possibly the Waldorf Astoria. George was managing the hotel. Louise may have been there. Cause, heart failure. Final crisis in years-long decline. Doctors summoned. George called. He arrives. Was he at the hotel? Nearby? We don't know. What we know, Louise dies quickly, within hours of collapse. Age, 41 years, 11 months. Born February 1862. George is with her. Accounts say he held her hand, spoke to her. Whether she was conscious is unrecorded. And then she's gone. George is shattered. Witnesses describe him as destroyed, broken, a man undone. The death is announced. Society is shocked. Louise was known, respected, wife of the Waldorf's famous proprietor. But more shocking, how young. 41. Heart disease, yes, but sudden death was unexpected by the public. George handles arrangements. Funeral planned, simple, private. Louise was never one for publicity. She's buried at Woodlawn Cemetery, the Bronx, prominent cemetery, industrialists, artists, notable New Yorkers interred there. George commissions a monument, not extravagant, but substantial, stone, carved, her name, birth, death. And then, perhaps within days, certainly within weeks, George makes a decision. He sends a telegram to Hart Island. The exact wording is lost, but the message is preserved. Stop all construction. 3 words, 1 command, absolute. On Hart Island, 300 workers receive the order. They stop. Mid-task, hammers down, saws silent, work abandoned immediately. Some rooms nearly finished, some only framed, the grand staircase installed, but details incomplete, the Italian gardens half-planted, the powerhouse operational, but cosmetic work unfinished. Everything stops. The workers pack tools, leave the island. Some stay in Alexandria Bay looking for other work. Most scatter, back to New York, back to Italy, back to Germany. The island empties. And George? He never returns, not once. For 12 years until his death in 1916, George lived, worked, managed the Waldorf, raised Clover and George Jr., but never went back to Hart Island. Why? The official explanation, grief. The castle was built for Louise. Without her, it was unbearable. But grief explains stopping construction. Grief explains pausing. Grief doesn't explain never returning, not once, not even to close it up properly, not to salvage materials, not to see it one last time. 12 years, and George never went back. That suggests something deeper than grief. That suggests guilt. Guilt that he built the castle instead of being with Louise. Guilt that he spent summers supervising construction instead of sitting with his dying wife. Guilt that he obsessed over stone instead of noticing she was fading. And guilt, unlike grief, doesn't heal with time. Guilt grows, festers. Every year George didn't return made it harder to return, because returning meant facing, what have I done? Not built, but neglected. The castle became accusation. You built me instead of loving her. So George avoided it, lived with the Waldorf, managed hotels. That he could control, that succeeded. But the castle, that was failure. Permanent, stone. George died October 5, 1916, age 64. Heart disease, same condition that killed Louise. He's buried beside her at Woodlawn Cemetery, together in death. But in life, separated by George's choices, by obsession, by the castle that should have brought them together, but drove them apart. And the castle? Abandoned. George's will didn't mention it, didn't bequeath to the children, didn't arrange for completion or sale. It just sat. Clover and George Jr. inherited other properties, Wellesley House, the farms, investments, but not Hart Island. Why? Because George couldn't even acknowledge it legally. The castle was guilt made stone. You don't bequeath guilt. So it passed, eventually through legal tangles to George Jr., but George Jr. didn't want it. Too painful, too expensive, too much. The castle sat. Through World War I, through the 1920s, through the Depression, empty, unfinished, freezing every winter, baking every summer, wind and rain and snow slowly destroying what 300 workers built. And the question that haunts, was the telegram punishment? Was George punishing himself, punishing the castle, punishing the obsession that killed his marriage? Stop all construction. Not pause, not delay, stop. Absolute, final, as if George was saying this was wrong, all of it. The castle was supposed to prove love. Instead, it proved you can build beauty and still fail at love. Because love isn't built. Love is given in time, in presence, in attention. Things George didn't give enough of. And the telegram, 3 words, 1 command, was his admission. I built the wrong thing. And he couldn't fix it, couldn't rebuild the years, couldn't bring Louise back, couldn't undo the choices. So he stopped and never looked back. Because looking back meant seeing the castle I built to show love actually shows the opposite. That I loved building more than being present. That I loved perfection more than moments. That I loved the idea of love more than the work of loving. And that truth, stone solid, undeniable, was too heavy to carry. So George left it on Hart Island, where it sits, still, waiting. Waiting for what? For George to come back? He's been dead 108 years. For someone to finish? It's being restored, slowly. For purpose? It's a museum now. Or maybe just waiting, the way abandoned things wait, silent, patient, holding the question that has no answer. What if George had chosen differently? 1904 to 1977, 73 years, Boldt Castle sits. Not maintained, not protected, not loved, just existing, slowly dying. 1904 to 1916, George's lifetime. The castle sits empty, locked, sort of. Locks don't keep out determined people. Local teenagers explore. Curious tourists boat over. Some steal. Door handles, light fixtures, anything portable. George Jr. technically owns it, does nothing, can't afford maintenance, can't bear to sell, can't finish, so it sits. The weather attacks, winter ice, spring rain, summer heat, fall storms, repeat, repeat, repeat. Water is the killer. Roofs leak, water enters, wood rot spreads, plaster absorbs moisture, softens, falls, metal corrodes. By 1916, when George Sr. dies, the castle is already deteriorating. 12 years of neglect visible. 1916 to 1930, post-George. George Jr. inherits officially, still does nothing. The Depression approaches, money tight. The castle is luxury no one can afford. Vandalism increases, windows broken systematically, copper wiring stripped, cells for scrap, lead pipes removed, anything metal, gone. Graffiti appears, names, dates, crude drawings, declarations of love, ironic given the castle's purpose. The island becomes local legend, the haunted castle. Kids dare each other to explore at night. Ghost stories multiply. Tourists visit illegally. No caretaker, no fence, just row over, walk in. Some visitors respectful, most not. Broken bottles, trash, fires lit in fireplaces, dangerous, chimneys unmaintained, could collapse. 1930 to 1950, Depression and War. The Depression devastates. No one's buying castles. No one's maintaining monuments. Survival is priority. World War II, resources diverted, labor scarce, materials rationed. Boldt Castle, irrelevant, forgotten, decaying. By 1950, the castle is ruin, not collapsed, structure sound. Trumbauer and the builders built too well for that, but interior destroyed. Roof, sections collapsed, water pours in, windows all broken, glass shattered, floors rotted in places, unsafe, walls, graffiti everywhere, plaster gone, exposing brick and stone. Woodwork rotted, stolen, destroyed, fixtures all gone, light fixtures, door hardware, anything valuable removed. The grand staircase still standing, but damaged, balustrades broken, treads cracked. The powerhouse gutted, all equipment stripped. The Ulster Tower, roof collapsed, interior exposed to the weather. The Dovecote partially collapsed. The Italian gardens, wilderness, statuary toppled or stolen, fountains broken, dry, terraces overgrown. 1950 to 1977, final decline. The castle reaches its lowest point, truly abandoned. No owner cares, no government claims it, just sits. Teenagers party there, alcohol, graffiti, vandalism as entertainment. Ghost hunters investigate, claim hauntings, more on this later. Photographers document ruin porn before the term existed, the romance of decay. Local preservationists worry. Boldt Castle is historic, architecturally significant, but also private property, can't intervene without owner permission. And the owner, George Jr., died 1964. The estate passed to distant relatives. They don't want it, don't want the expense, don't want the liability. Proposal surface. Demolish. Too expensive. Who pays? Sell. To whom? Who wants a ruined castle on an island? Maintenance costs are astronomical. Donate. To whom? Who can afford restoration? So it sits, year after year, decaying. By 1975, estimates suggest $5 to $10 million needed for stabilization alone. Full restoration, $20 to $30 million, maybe more. No one has that money. No one wants to spend it on a dead millionaire's monument to a dead wife. Boldt Castle seems doomed. Demolition or total collapse. Either way, gone within a decade. Then, 1977, a miracle, sort of. The Thousand Islands Bridge Authority acquired the property. How? The Boldt heirs finally gave up. Couldn't sell, couldn't maintain, liability risk too high. They approached the Bridge Authority, a regional government agency managing the bridges connecting U.S. and Canada. The authority? Reluctant. Taking on Boldt Castle means taking on massive expense, restoration, maintenance, liability, but also opportunity, tourism. The Thousand Islands region was growing as vacation destination. Boldt Castle, restored, could be major attraction. The deal? Bridge Authority takes ownership, promises to restore using all net revenues from castle operation. No taxpayer money, self-funding restoration. The question? Could it work? Could ticket sales fund restoration? Unknown, but the authority decided try, because the alternative was losing Boldt Castle forever. And that, 73 years after construction stopped, would be the final tragedy. A monument to love destroyed by neglect. So, in 1977, restoration began. Not complete, not fast, but steady. And Boldt Castle, after 73 years of death, began to live again. But the question remains, what was lost? In those 73 years, what disappeared forever? Original furnishings, all stolen or destroyed. Custom fixtures, light fixtures, hardware, decorative elements, gone. Woodwork details, carved elements, paneling, much rotted or stolen. Original finishes, paint colors, wallpapers, plaster details, destroyed. Landscaping, plantings, statuary, garden layouts obliterated. What survives? The stone, the structure, the bones. The rest, the details that made it George and Louise's castle, is gone. So restoration is informed guesswork, historical records, photographs, few, similar estates, best approximations. The castle being restored isn't George's castle. It's interpretation of George's castle. Close, beautiful, but not the same. That's the cost of abandonment. Not just decay, but loss of authenticity. The original is gone, forever. What remains is memorial to George, to Louise, to obsession, to love, but also to abandonment, to neglect, to what happens when grand gestures are left to rot. Boldt Castle survived 73 years, barely, but it never recovered what those years took. And maybe that's fitting, because the castle was always about loss. Loss of Louise, loss of time, loss of what might have been. Now it's also about loss of itself, the original, the dream. What we have now, beautiful approximation, historic site, tourist attraction. But George's castle, that died in 1904 when construction stopped. Everything since is just an echo. Beautiful echo, worth preserving, but echo nonetheless. For 73 years, Boldt Castle stood empty, and nature wasn't the only thing that entered. People came, hundreds, thousands across decades. Some respectful, most not. Let's talk about what they did and what they claimed to see. The Vandals. Vandalism began immediately. Within months of construction stopping, locals explored, broke windows, stole fixtures. By the 1920s, systematic stripping, copper wiring pulled out. Copper was valuable, sold for scrap. Lead pipes removed, door hardware, light fixtures, decorative bronze, anything metal, portable, saleable. Woodwork attacked, carved panels pried off walls, balustrades broken for firewood or souvenirs. Graffiti everywhere, names, dates, Tommy loves Sally 1945, class of 52, crude drawings, profanity. Fires. Teenagers partied, lit fires in fireplaces. Dangerous. Chimneys unmaintained. Structures could collapse. Some fires got out of control, damaged rooms. Broken glass everywhere. Windows systematically smashed. Floors covered in shattered glass, plaster, debris. By the 1970s, Boldt Castle was war zone. Every surface damaged, every room violated. Why? Multiple reasons. Thrill. Abandoned places attract, especially castles, the forbidden, the decaying grandeur. Profit. Scrap metal had value. Fixtures could be sold. Souvenirs. Take a piece of history. Doesn't matter that it's theft. Destruction for its own sake. Some people destroy because they can. No consequences. No one cares. The vandalism was loss. Irreplaceable details destroyed, historical authenticity erased, and no one stopped it because no one owned it, or no one who owned it cared enough to protect it. That's abandonment's cruelest cost, not just weather, but human destruction. The ghost hunters. Abandoned castle, tragic love story, sudden death, unfinished monument. Perfect for ghost stories. By the 1940s and 50s, locals claimed Boldt Castle is haunted. The stories? Claim 1. Louise's ghost. Multiple witnesses, decades apart, report seeing a woman in period dress, always described similarly. Long dress, elaborate, 1900s style, dark hair, pale, sad. Locations: the morning room, Louise's sitting room, the music room where her piano was, the grand staircase. Behavior: standing, looking out windows, sometimes playing piano, though no piano present. When approached, vanishes. Explanation: pareidolia, seeing patterns or figures in shadows. Expectation, people expecting ghosts see them. Mist, light through broken windows, creating illusions. Counter, multiple independent witnesses, consistent descriptions. Some witnesses unaware of the castle's history when they saw the figure. Verdict, ambiguous, could be psychological, could be something else. Claim 2, the workman. Sounds of construction, hammers, saws, voices speaking German, Italian, heard primarily in summer when construction occurred 1900 to 1904. Witnesses, numerous, including modern restoration workers who've heard unexplained sounds. Explanation, old buildings make noise, settling, wind, animals, acoustic anomalies, the power of suggestion. Counter, restoration workers, skeptical, practical people, report hearing what sounds like period construction. One electrician in the 1980s was, "I heard hammering from upstairs, went to check, no one there, room empty." Verdict, ambiguous, probably natural sounds misinterpreted, but consistency is notable. Claim 3, cold spots. Specific rooms feel dramatically colder, not drafts, closed rooms, no wind, just cold. Most reported Louise's morning room, the master bedroom, the music room. Temperature drops of 10 to 15 degrees reported. Explanation, old buildings are drafty, broken windows, failed insulation, uneven heating when the castle was occupied for restoration work. Counter, modern restoration includes climate control, yet workers still report cold spots in specific rooms. No HVAC explanation. Verdict, ambiguous, leaning skeptical. Old buildings are cold, but localized dramatic drops are odd. Claim 4, the piano. Multiple witnesses report hearing piano music, faint, classical, coming from the music room. When investigated, silence, no piano present, stolen decades ago. Explanation, auditory hallucination. Expectation, knowing Louise played piano. Sound traveling from nearby boats or residences. Acoustic tricks. Counter, witnesses include modern tourists who didn't know Louise played piano. They report hearing music and are surprised when told the room is empty. Verdict, ambiguous, probably misidentified sound, but reports persist. Verdict, most ambiguous of all. Grief is subjective, but the consistency is striking. The pattern. Boldt Castle ghost stories are consistent, not wild, not contradictory. Same figure, same locations, same emotions. Either mass suggestion, everyone knows the story, expects ghosts, experiences what they expect. Residual energy, trauma, Louise's death, George's grief left imprint on location. Or actual hauntings, if you believe in that. Science says 1. Psychology explains everything. Believers say 2 or 3, too consistent to dismiss. The truth? Unknowable. What we know, people experience something. Whether it's psychological or paranormal is interpretation. But here's what's undeniable. The castle feels haunted. Not by ghosts necessarily, but by absence, by loss, by unfinished dreams. Walk through Boldt Castle today, restored, beautiful, safe, and you still feel it. The sadness, the emptiness. Rooms built for joy that knew only abandonment. House designed for love that held only wind. A monument that was supposed to celebrate life, but instead marks death. That's the haunting. Not supernatural, emotional. The castle itself is the ghost. Ghost of George's dream. Ghost of Louise's life. Ghost of what might have been. And that haunting, undeniable, permanent, is why people keep coming. Not to see stones, to feel something. Loss, regret, the terrible fragility of love and life. You can't photograph that, can't measure it, but everyone who visits feels it. And maybe that's the real legacy of Boldt Castle. Not architecture, not history, but reminder. Life is short. Love is fragile. Grand gestures can't replace presence. And that lesson, learned too late by George, embodied in stone, is worth more than any building, even if it hurts to learn it. 1977. The Thousand Islands Bridge Authority takes ownership. The task? Save Boldt Castle. Restore it. Make it sustainable. The challenges? Massive. Condition assessment. Engineers survey the property. The verdict? Catastrophic decay, but structurally salvageable. The stone? Solid. George's builders built too well. Foundation intact. Walls sound. Towers stable. Everything else? Destroyed or severely damaged. Roof? 60% collapsed or failing. Windows? 100% broken. Interior plaster? 80% destroyed. Woodwork? 70% rotted or stolen. Floors? 40% unsafe. Systems, electric, plumbing, heating, 100% non-functional. Outbuildings, powerhouse gutted, Ulster Tower roof collapsed, dovecote partially fallen. Cost estimate for stabilization, $5 million. Cost for full restoration, $20 to $30 million, possibly more. The Bridge Authority's decision? Restore incrementally. Use all net revenues from castle operations, ticket sales, tours, events, to fund ongoing work. No taxpayer money. Self-funding. Slow but sustainable. The strategy? Stabilize first. Stop further decay. Roof, windows, weathertight. Open to public, even partially ruined. Charge admission. Generate revenue. Restore gradually, room by room, building by building, year by year. Adapt where necessary. Can't recreate original perfectly. Use period-appropriate approximations. The work, 1977 to present. Phase 1, 1977 to 1985, emergency stabilization. New roof sections, temporary windows, structural bracing, basic safety measures. Castle opens to tours, 1977. Visitors see work in progress. Phase 2, 1985 to 1995. Major systems. Electrical throughout. Plumbing and heating. Elevators for accessibility. Fire suppression. Security systems. Phase 3, 1995 to 2010. Interior restoration. Plaster repair or replacement. Woodwork restoration, surviving pieces, and replication, lost pieces. Floors refinished or replaced. Period-appropriate furnishings, not originals, those are gone. Bathrooms, kitchen made functional. Phase 4, 2010 to present. Outbuildings and grounds. Powerhouse restored, museum exhibits now. Ulster Tower, roof replaced, interior stabilized. Dovecote rebuilt. Italian gardens, partially recreated based on historical photos. Ongoing detail work. Cost to date, over $40 million, all from ticket sales and donations. Current status, 95% of castle restored or stabilized, 100,000 plus visitors annually. Net revenues continue funding ongoing work. Still not finished, may never be fully complete. What's been achieved? A ruin has been saved. Not perfectly, not originally, but saved. What's lost? Authenticity, the original details, George's exact vision. What remains is interpretation, best guess, period appropriate, beautiful, but not the same. That's the cost of abandonment. Even with restoration, you never get back what was lost. The questions restoration raises. 1. Should it have been restored? Arguments 4. Historic significance, architectural masterpiece, love story, regional tourism draw, economic benefit to Alexandria Bay. Arguments against, enormous expense, not authentic anymore. Resources could fund other needs, housing, infrastructure, education. Both are valid. Preservation isn't objective good, it's choice, priorities. 2. Is restored Boldt Castle real? Philosophically, if you replace 70% of a building, is it the same building? Ship of Theseus problem. Practically, it's real enough. Visitors experience grandeur, understand the history, feel the tragedy. Perfectly authentic? No. But perfect authenticity was destroyed by vandals and time. This is what's possible now, and it's worth something. 3. Would George approve? Unknown. George abandoned it, never wanted it finished without Louise. But maybe, restoration honors them both. Louise gets the castle George intended. George's vision is preserved. Both are remembered. Or maybe George would see it as a violation. I stopped construction for a reason. We'll never know. What the restoration proves: grand gestures can be saved, but not perfectly. Love monuments outlast the love and become something else. Abandonment has permanent costs. Even resurrection can't fully undo death. That's what Boldt Castle teaches. Painfully, permanently, in stone that was meant to last forever, but couldn't save anyone. Hart Island, today. Boldt Castle stands, restored, beautiful. Tourists arrive by boat, walk the Brand staircase, tour 120 rooms, photograph the towers. They hear the love story, George and Louise, the castle, the telegram, stop all construction. They sigh, romantic, tragic, beautiful, and they leave. But the castle remains, holding questions that don't have easy answers. Was George's love real? Yes, but also insufficient. He loved Louise, but loved building more, or couldn't express love except through building. Was the castle a monument to love? Yes, but also monument to absence, to what love isn't. Stone can't replace presence. Should it have been finished? George said no. Restoration said yes. Both are defensible. Is it haunted? Maybe, by ghosts or by grief or by our own projection of tragedy. Does it matter which? What's the lesson? That time is the only thing you can't buy back. George was rich, built castles, lost everything that mattered, because he built instead of being present. That's the warning, not about castles, about choices. Every hour spent building something is an hour not spent with someone. Sometimes that's necessary. Work matters, creation matters. But George's tragedy, he didn't balance, didn't realize until too late, and couldn't undo it. Boldt Castle is beautiful, and it's a gravestone, marking not just Louise's death, but the death of time they could have spent together. That's why it hurts to visit, even now, even restored, because the beauty is accusation. Look what I built instead of loving you. And no amount of stone can answer that. If you've stayed for this hour-long investigation, thank you. Like this video if it made you feel something. Subscribe if you want more investigations into America's most heartbreaking monuments, where love meets obsession and grand gestures reveal what they can't replace. Tell me in the comments, have you visited Boldt Castle? Was George's love real or performative? Can grand gestures ever replace presence? Which tragic love monument should we investigate next? Your engagement drives these investigations. Your thoughts matter. And one final thought. William Randolph Hearst built 165 rooms and couldn't finish. George Boldt built 120 rooms and stopped after one telegram. Both monuments to obsession, both warnings. The lesson isn't don't build. The lesson is know what you're building and why and what it costs. Not in money, in time, in presence, in moments you can't get back. Because stone lasts, moments don't. And when the moments are gone, the stone just reminds you what you lost. Boldt Castle stands, beautiful, tragic, true. A monument to love that couldn't save love. Thank you for watching. Thank you for thinking. I'll see you in the next investigation.